The Department of Education has made a number of material changes to not just the FAFSA application that's going to become available later in 2023, but also the FAFSA calculation itself. A lot of parents are going to be very surprised to find out that the aid they may have been awarded in previous years could drop dramatically under the new calculations. The first surprise that parents may encounter is the delay in the release date of the actual FAFSA application. So in most years, it becomes available October 1st for completion for the following school year, but this year in 2023, it's going to be delayed until December 1st due to the changes they're making in the forms, the updates to the software, the training they need to do to the staff. So because it's delayed, parents are going to have less time to complete the FAFSA application for the 24-25 school year. While the delay of the application in 2023 can be viewed as a drawback, it is happening for some good reasons, like the legislation that they passed in 2020 to essentially simplify the FAFSA process, because parents that have been through the FAFSA process before, it is a complete headache. There's a ton of questions. You need to gather a lot of information. And a lot of ways they word the questions on the FAFSA application, you're not even really sure what exactly they're asking for. So one of the changes that they made is the old FAFSA form had like 108 questions on it that you had to answer. The new FAFSA application is only expected to have 36, and they're also expected to adjust some of the wording in the FAFSA application to make it more clear what they're asking for. Another major change is there will no longer be an EFC, or expected family contribution. For parents that are familiar with the FAFSA process, you fill out the whole FAFSA application, and then it spits out this number, which is considered the expected family contribution, which is a little bit misleading because people view that as, okay, that's the amount I have to pay out of pocket before I get to any need-based financial aid, when in reality, it's really the family's need relative to the other applicants. To eliminate this confusion, they are now replacing the EFC term with something called SAI, which stands for Student Aid Index. So when you get to the end of the FAFSA process now, it's going to result in an SAI amount, which is what the EFC was before. I think the most material change to all this are the changes that they're actually making to the FAFSA calculation that will dramatically impact the aid award for certain families. And one of the first most dramatic changes that they're making is they used to give you a discount in FAFSA if you had multiple children in college at the same time. So the way the calculation used to work is you'd fill out the FAFSA, it would give you your EFC amount, your expected family contribution, but then you were able to split that amount evenly between the number of kids you had in college. So the way it would work is if your EFC was, let's say, $30,000, but you had 2 kids in college, it would be split $15,000 for each child, which would allow you to qualify for more need-based financial aid. Starting in the 2024-2025 school year and going forward, this will no longer be how the calculation is run, and that discount is no longer provided. So essentially now if you produce this SAI, Student Aid Index, which is the new EFC, and let's say it produces $30,000, that $30,000 is applied in full to each of your children. It is no longer split between the two. So parents that might have gotten a substantial amount of aid the year before might no longer be getting any aid, or might be getting a lot less, because now that full SAI amount is being applied to each child. The other big financial aid disruption is going to happen most likely with divorced parents. So the way FAFSA works right now is the custodial parent, as defined by FAFSA, is the parent that actually fills out the application and reports their income and assets. But the FAFSA's definition of custodial parent is the parent that the child lived with for the majority of the year for the 12 months leading up to the FAFSA application. This situation often created a more favorable financial aid award if the child was living for a majority of the year with a spouse that had lower income and lower assets. This is about to change. So for the 2024-2025 school year and going forward, now the custodial parent is going to be the parent that is considered to be providing the most financial support, not necessarily who the child lived with for the majority of the year. And they're going to look at, for the determination of this, the prior year. So if we're talking about going to school for the 2024-2025 school year, they're going to be looking at the financial support that was provided back in 2022. Let me go through an example with you to show how this can impact financial aid for divorced couples. So let's say Joe and Sue got divorced 5 years ago, and their daughter Mary is currently a sophomore in college. Sue is a homemaker. Mary lives with her mother for the majority of the year. Joe makes about $300,000 per year and pays Sue $25,000 per year in child support and $40,000 per year in alimony. For the 23-24 school year, under the old FAFSA calculations, Sue was considered the custodial parent because Mary lived with her for most of the year. She would be the one to complete the FAFSA application using her annual income and assets. And since Joe was not the custodial parent, Joe's income and assets are ignored for purposes of FAFSA. Now, under the new rules for the 2024-2025 school years going forward, since Joe provided a majority of the financial support back in 2022 via child support and alimony for Mary, Joe would now have to be the parent that's required to submit the FAFSA application based on his income and assets. And since Joe's income is substantially higher than Sue's, it could result in a much lower financial aid award. In these situations, people have already started to raise questions about, what if it's close? What if both parents make relatively the same amount? And some of the initial guidance that's kind of come out is if there's a tie, the tie will be broken by whatever parent has the higher AGI, or adjusted gross income. One of the largest sources of need-based financial aid that the federal government provides is in the form of something called a Pell Grant. Now, Pell Grants are also changing going forward. They actually increase the max amount that's available for Pell Grants, but they also change the calculation at the same time. The nice part about this change, however, is parents will be able to preview if their child is eligible for a Pell Grant before they even complete the FAFSA application, which is a new feature this year. A favorable change that they made in the FAFSA calculation actually involves distributions from grandparent-owned 529 accounts. So under the old FAFSA rules, if there were distributions made out of a grandparent-owned 529 on behalf of a grandchild, that grandchild then had to pick up those distributions as income of the student, which greatly penalizes the financial aid award in future years. So under the new rules, those distributions from grandparent-owned 529s or 529s of someone other than the parent no longer count as income of the student, which just made these grandparent 529 accounts even more valuable. The final favorable change that they made to the FAFSA calculation was they actually increased the income protection allowance in the FAFSA formula, which now excludes more income of the student and the parents from the FAFSA calculation. Prior to these changes, the student's income protection was about $7,000 per year, which means a student can earn up to $7,000 without that income then factoring into the FAFSA calculation. Now, going forward for school year 2024-2025, they increased that allowance for students up to about $9,400. So again, it's just protecting more income. For parents, they also increased the allowances by roughly about 20% over the old limits. As you can see, a lot of changes in the works. Some are good, some are bad, but each family is going to have to determine their circumstance, whether the aid package they've been receiving in the past is going to be close to the aid package they're going to receive going forward, given the changes that have taken place. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at moneysmartboard.com. Thank you.